So we're having a great start to our visiting authors program. As you can see on either side of me, our visiting authors are here. They're in classrooms. They're doing assemblies, and we have a film screening tonight with William. So I hope if you do have the time, 6 o'clock film, and then a Q&A and really interesting stories, both of them. So, but today is about budget and about our increases for next year. Brian Stone is with me this morning, our finance director, who's going to give you, whether you realize it or not, you're going to get a budget 101, how it works at ASD and how a nonprofit works from Diane. And we also have Joe Libredo here, our board chair. And do we have any other trustees here today? So I'm Paul Richards. So I'm going to take the opportunity to just highlight a couple of things. I think most of you have been in some of the Talk Tuesdays this year, but I want to highlight a couple things you may not have seen before. But we'll start, of course, with our mission, and this is why we exist, the whole purpose. Why does a place like the American School of Dubai exist? It is to challenge and inspire your students to be ready for their future. So this rapidly changing world is what really keeps us on our toes now. So with the talk about 5G coming, educators, we think, it's not we think all the things we can do and all the food we can order or things like that. It's more, are we going to reach the point now where your children will have a 5G powered artificial intelligence personal assistant that they carry around with them, whether it's in their phone or other device, to help them access the programs and the learning at the American School of Dubai. This is what excites us. There's a little bit of trepidation, of course, as well. But it shows you that, we're preparing your children for the world they're going to go into, not the one that we perhaps entered a few years ago. So this is one of the visuals, and Dr. Michelle Remington's with us in the back, our Associate Superintendent. She's helped kind of crystallize the thinking of how do we take so many different things that we're doing, so many initiatives, and try to simplify it. So you can do it with this basic Venn diagram, which is on the left here, you have doing things better. So a lot of what we do, we're simply trying to get better at it. And there's a science and an importance to that in itself. You don't always have to invent something new. So whether it's the way we assess your students, the way we report back to you, so the data, the relationship we have, whether we're becoming and trying to become a more inclusive school, so every one of our children has access to all the programs. And then, of course, our relationship with service learning and our relationship with volunteerism. We have a lot of that going on now. We want to get better at that. And then when you look to my left, to your right, this is the doing better things. This is the disruption to the traditional Victorian model of schooling. We want to do something different. So we envisioned the concept of pathways, this curated collection of experiences. So yes, all of our students will go through, they'll get certain programs, they'll have a lot of commonalities, but we want that path to have options that pursue areas of interest. So whether it's business and entrepreneurship, tech and innovation, language development, global citizenship, or even performance, we want your children, if they so have that passion, to be able to explore that. And that's where we hit the sweet spot in the middle, the one thing. The one thing for us is a personalized and relevant learning experience. You send us your children, you invest a lot in the ASD community, both financially and time-wise. And your children deserve a more personalized experience than perhaps we received when we went through school. And it has to be relevant. There's a huge shift going on now with our relationship with content. A lot of the content we have is already out there on the internet. And some of the content, frankly, is irrelevant now. So what are the fields like biotechnology or nanotechnology or cultural competence, things like that will be highly relevant to your children. If it's highly relevant, we need to expose them in school. And not just at the older ages, but the earliest ages. So you haven't seen this before. This is a visual I've used with our administrative team. John Cotter, the retired Harvard professor, is a real guru in the business world and leadership. He talks about how do you take an organization and lead it towards change. And there are basically 8 steps that he's made his career on, that he's identified. This was a visual I shared with the board and as well to show kind of where we were in this process. So Professor Cotter says, you need to create the urgency, and then you need to start building the people, the small army of people who believe that this is the right thing to do, and you create a vision. And we have a pretty good vision. We're not quite at ground level. We're probably at 2,000 or 3,000 feet of where we want to be in the next few years as far as our learning program. And then you start communicating. So the Talk Tuesdays we do, the letters that I've sent out, there'll be many more about really what are we talking about here with this program and this improvement. And you start to empower people. This is one of the biggest things that we're doing now, is telling the teachers, and we're going to have a big staff meeting today with everybody. Beginning of the year, I challenged them to try something new, to be disruptive to the same old that they may be doing over time. We're giving permission all across the campus and all across the community to try new things. So whether it's research and development or just getting better or doing better things, this is a huge part of the equation. And as you start to identify some early wins, things that are relatively easy, you work on the harder things. And the hardest part of this entire initiative is really getting those of us teachers who were trained a very different way and have certain pressures on us to shift a whole number of things. Shift our relationship with how much content knowledge we try to impart on our students. Shift our role of even being front and center. This is a very traditional way of teaching or presenting. If I went into a classroom and it was 45 minutes of this, we'd be speaking to the teacher saying the balance is out of whack. It has to be much more balanced between teacher and student-centered. And then, of course, the more we build on the change, the more it becomes the new normal and it sticks. And the last graphic, apologize for the resolution. This is one of the last things John Cotter did before he retired, is he wrote a book called Accelerate, and it was to businesses who, as businesses like Sears and Roebuck and other really long-standing institutions went bankrupt. It's because he recognized that in order to thrive in a rapidly changing world, you need to have 2 systems going at the same time. So you have the hierarchy, which is what the kind of the old model, and hierarchy is really good at certain things. It's good at managing people. It's good at balancing the books. It does a lot of things well. What it doesn't do well is change. It doesn't do well with innovation. And if you're going to rapidly change your organization and survive, you have to have a network. You have to have kind of a startup. So the idea that startups are really good at this, not very good at hierarchy, eventually they become both. So even Facebook now has a hierarchy, Google has a hierarchy, but they also have a network that facilitates the change. So this is our challenge at ASD, is to create the network that's not arranged, teams of people not arranged around positions or even divisions, but around the work that's being done. So whether they're innovating with a report card, whether they're innovating with their space, we are building this dual operating system at ASD. So I hope hope that makes a little bit of sense of how we're approaching the leadership side. I've spoken a lot to you about just the content of what we're doing. This gets to the how. So we also haven't taken much time to talk about space. You've heard me mention earlier in the year that we're partnering with Fielding Nair International, who are one of the leading architects around space, especially in schools. They're based out of Singapore. They've just master planned the new Singapore American School with a brand new campus. They're going to deliver a 10 to 15 year master plan for us in June. They've been here a couple times. They're helping us design the bottom floor of the new building, which we're very pleased that sand and dirt is being moved around. You'll hear a more formal announcement before spring break. But the bottom floor of this building is going to be a world-class 3-, 4-, and 5-year-old program. Yes, 3-year-olds. We've never had a 3-year-old program. We've been asked for years by KHDA to consider it. We're doing it, and we're super excited. It's going to be a space you haven't seen before. And then we're also going to, look at this campus. This campus is a fantastic facility, but it's very boxy. Basically, teachers, students go into that room. There's not a lot of opportunity for collaborative learning with the space we have. So in each of the 3 divisions, you're going to start to see some of these commons. Sometimes they're called learning communities or connected commons, which is kind of an interim approach. But we're going to take some of these walls. So if these are 2 middle school classrooms, we're going to take these walls out. And it's going to be, and we're going to open up this space. So it's actually a space where you'd have 2 classes in there, but and you'd have 2 teachers. But they would be interacting and they'd be doing their lessons at certain times, but in a more communal space. We recently visited Singapore American. They're about 3 to 4 years ahead of us, and it's been a huge impact on education. Why would we do this? Not to create chaos. Although a lot of people look at that and are like, are you serious? It's to positively impact the teaching. The type of teaching that we want, type of instruction, can be heavily influenced if you change the space, even quicker than if you just give people lots of professional development. So this is where kind of our first splash in the middle school. The KG team are super excited, especially as they're moving into the new building next year. Even though they're moving in 2020, next year they want to disrupt their boxy classrooms. So if you look at this pair of kindergarten classrooms, we're going to take this out. We're going to take half of the dividing wall out. These are toilets, it's not easy to move. So now what you'll have is 2 classes, 2 teachers, 2 instructional assistants, but 1 space. And you'll have some time when they'll probably all be together. You'll have time when they're separated. You'll have time when something might be going over here, that the students are mixed, and something else is going to go over here, and you'll have students over here. So the teachers, again, are really excited about this, and this has such a huge impact on their teaching and their collaboration, and just the social and learning experience of your children when you take walls out. Okay. I didn't want to ramble on because I know we're here about a different subject, but I always want to take the opportunity to just give you a glimpse of where we are at this moment in time with our strategic initiatives, because this is really what we're so super excited about. And when we talk about budget and our financial strategic plan, it is to support not only what we do today, but what we want to do tomorrow. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Diane, give her the control of the clicker.
I'll just use the space bar.
You'll use the space bar. You actually have to come over here. You won't be on the screen.
Okay. Oh, they're filming this? Okay.
They are filming
Oh.
this.
I put on more makeup if I know. Good morning, everyone. I'm Diane Stone. I've been the Director of Finance here. This is my 3rd year. And I'm finally feeling like I'm not new, so that's a good feeling. And yes, I just want to thank you all for coming this morning. I know you all have busy things and active lives, but basically where this presentation originated from was Michelle Kateri is our new Director of Development, and she had asked if I could come and speak to the ambassadors, and she was hearing a recurring theme that there wasn't enough transparency around the finances, and especially around the annual giving campaign. So out of that emerged a discussion of just introducing a degree of transparency around the finances. So this is our first attempt at communicating with you where we're at with the finances of the school and what our overriding mandate is. So really what I want to start with is the beginning framework. From the first board meeting that I attended, I talked about, and the finance committee started establishing some norms of what we were attempting to do. And basically the equation is really simple. We're trying to maximize the student learning experience for your children and equip our educators with research and development opportunities, excellent professional development, at the same time as we're highly competitive for comp and benefits, able to attract the best and the brightest teachers, maintain our facilities to a world-class level, have excellent financial planning norms around saving for the future and contingency planning, all while operating as a not-for-profit school with the overriding goal of containing tuition costs and to ensure that the most number of North American students residing in Dubai can attend the school. So really that's the simple equation. Contain tuition to the degree we can while maximizing program offerings. And everyone coming from unique family and personal financial situations would see that equation slightly differently. So our goal is to always balance that equation to make sure that we're servicing the most North American students while accomplishing these things. So effectively, that's the equation that we're seeking to solve in what we do. I think sometimes there's this misunderstanding that tuition containment isn't one of the values that we hold. And what I was surprised by, actually coming from a school in North America where that was a very significant value, is how much discussion that we entertain at both the finance committee level and the board level about tuition containment and responding to the local economy. So really the next level down from that lofty view is getting into the fund accounting model that we've set up. So I want to go through at the highest level the finances of each one of these funds. So the operating fund is where we direct your tuition dollars, and out of that we pay our teachers and our staff. We fund the rents on our housing and provide housing to our teachers and administrators and overseas hires. That education is the consumable cost of education, so the paper and the pens that are consumed in the classroom, as well as research and development, professional development, and the work of the Teaching and Learning Center in educating and equipping our teachers in the latest trends in education, and then the administrative overhead costs. And then we also, out of that, the consumable costs of maintaining our facilities. So that would be our contractor, El Shawari, the heat, light, and water and DWA of running the buildings. So that's the annual consumable costs. There's no capital costs that are charged to this budget. This operating budget is run on a break-even basis. So our goal is, at the very most, is ever to have a surplus of 0 to 3% is the target we've set for this. So our goal is to break even on this, which you can understand on a $40 to $42 million budget isn't always easy to do. So we try to come within as close as possible as we can to break even. Secondly, in the capital fund, that's where we direct your facility fee, your capital fee. Capital fee is the fee paid on admission, as well as corporate seat sales. So if companies want to purchase seats that will allow their employees increased accessibility, then we'll direct the monies into this fund. So what do we do with the monies directed to the capital fund? Well, that's where we engage in the debt repayment on the loans that we have on any of the fixed assets that we have, and major capital projects and civil works. That's where those monies are directed. The third fund is the development fund, and that is where we have our scholarships. Now, scholarships pertain not to scholarships to attend ASD, but post-secondary scholarships. I believe there's 10 to 15 scholarships. Michelle, you can correct me, you probably know, somewhere in that range, of scholarships in around the $1,500 range. And some of those are internal scholarships that we created here, either associated with former alumni or, and then other ones are funded from outside. So a third party will say, we want to offer a scholarship to ASD graduates who are going into a business program, so we want to fund and endow a scholarship that the residual returns on that will be used to fund that scholarship. These are fully funded scholarships, so the returns are used to distribute in the form of the scholarships. Endowments and reserves. So we've done a lot of work in this area, and it continues. So we recognize that the best schools in North America and international schools have endowments, and we differentiate between endowments and reserves. Endowments being the funds for future, and it fuels our contingency plan. It's gifts that come from major donors in perpetuity. So it's capital that's never encroached on. Reserves are different. Reserves are money that are set aside for future enhancements to the facility. So we know that best practices are to save for future capital needs of the school and put aside monies for that. So our goal is eventually to create reserves around our facilities. So that's where those are housed in the development fund. Then we take a look at the annual giving gala and major gifts. So over the last 3 years, we've had a lot of different families that have come forward and given money towards sustainability, the arts, athletics. We have our B project. We now have monies coming out of this directed towards the visiting authors, and we're able to do additional things. The idea is never that this will become something that we heat, light, and water the buildings with. It's not meant to be operating in nature. It's meant to be additional things that enhance the learning experiences of your students through these funds. And what we wanted to provide to you is the assurance that these monies that are earmarked for these purposes are tracked individually by project. So for example, if money was given for sustainability, or we've won so many awards this year in sustainability, that money is tracked and directed and overseen by whichever individual is overseeing that particular area. So Model UN is a good example. We earmark that and all those monies are tracked directly towards that endeavor. And we've really made some forward motion in that. No administration or overhead charges are charged back to this. So our advancement department operates as a cost center within the school. We don't charge back against the annual giving campaign or the gala. I mean, the direct costs of the gala are charged there, so the cost of the venue, but we're not allocating costs against any monies that are fundraised. And also funds that are not spent in one year are carried forward into the next year. So I just wanted to provide some assurances, because these were some of the questions that we started hearing about, that people were losing confidence, and I just wanted to ensure that you understand when it comes to the fundraising, how these monies are tracked. Okay, and then, you know, as accountants, we don't like to toot our own horn, but there are some things that we consider best practices worldwide. We've spent a lot of time working on some goal setting and some best practices. So I just wanted to communicate a few of those to you. So one is goal setting. One of the big projects of the Finance Committee that they've committed a lot of time to, and has been research around ratio analysis. So we set 3 target areas. The first one is the annual budget. We set goals, irrespective of the actual annual budget. In the fall, before we even really put pen to paper, we said, what do we want to do? We want to stabilize tuition increases. We want to make sure that we address comp and benefits, worldwide benchmarking. So we set goals in the area of the annual budget. We reflect back on the previous school year. So in the fall, we look at the annual results from the previous year, and we've set very specific targets and ratios for how much we spent on administrative costs versus direct teaching costs. What percentage of overhead costs did we have relative to education costs? And we've set target ratios for all of those things, and we're measuring and tracking it over time on a heat map that says red, yellow, and green is Paul's favorite, is to track. So we're able to say, are we reaching our goals? If not, what can we do differently this coming year in anticipation of the spend that will allow us to achieve our targeted results? And then what we also set some other longer term goals, debt to equity ratios, percentage of owned housing, and all these other targets that we're working towards on an annual basis. Okay, so that's goal setting. Benchmarking. It's really interesting because our costs for tuition are set based on the local economy. Our revenue is set based on the local economy. So what we feel the market can absorb in tuition is set locally, but our expenses are set internationally. It was one of the first things that hit me coming here, is that I'm benchmarking to Singapore and China and Europe for my expenses, but yet I'm feeling pressure locally. So that's one of the really unusual things that we experience in financial planning at an international school. So what we do is I've created personally a network of NISA business managers, and then as well as business managers in Europe and in Asia, that we have an ongoing access to real data. So I'll just fire out to my WhatsApp group, what do you guys do for this benefit? And I can actually have results back in less than 24 hours, really quality data that's coming direct from, without doing these big surveys. We also participate in a number of data collection exercises. One of the groups that I'm involved with does a very extensive survey that we can benchmark how much admin staff we have relative to other schools, what percentage are we spending on our health benefits relative to other schools. And of course you have regional differences, but it's really providing us the data that we can use to manage the finances at the school. A stewardship model, I just wanted to fast forward to this one, and basically we look at this. This is the crux of the difference between a not-for-profit school and a for-profit school. A for-profit school is trying to maximize the education experience of the students while maximizing shareholder value. We don't have a shareholder to be accountable to, so really the twist of that logic is we're accountable to you as parents. We reference and point reference what our parent community is saying, and it's very important to us. Sometimes it's hard to get access to the real data around that, but we consider ourselves stewards. So when we consider decisions moving forward, we look at whether that's going to offer you the value and the return on investment that you would want for your tuition dollar. And it's not, everything is measured in financial terms, but when we're planning the budget, that's a very important piece, is that's our point of reference rather than the shareholders. And that's reflected in our board composition, it's reflected in our finance committee composition. Okay, cost containment. We have done, and now this is Paul really wants me to be careful on this, because we don't want you to understand that what we're doing is carving expenses out of your children's experience and counting pencils in the classroom. What we're doing is we've really done a lot of work on invisible costs, and that is things like our healthcare costs, our underlying costs. Joe Librato's been in meetings with me when I'm with the contractors, and I'm on the contractors and carving out costs associated with our building projects. And so anything that doesn't impact the experience of your students in the classroom is what we focused our cost containment efforts on. We've also sought to reduce pockets of money, unutilized budget. So in other words, if we have to charge you a certain amount of tuition, but we're not using that budget in those given areas, we've rationalized those budgets as well to really seek to make sure our budgets are reflective of the actual spending that's going to be occurring in the coming year. So one of the questions last night from a mom was, well, how are the teachers feeling about this? And at this point, we really feel like this is not an endeavor that's even impacted the classroom. The teacher will be unaware of any cost containment. Really what we're doing is we're looking at Michelle's department, digital versus print communication. Where are we at? What are the admin costs and overhead of people like me? My value equation for employing me has to be rationalized because I don't impact directly the student experience in the classroom. And that goes across the board. And there's actually been a lot of cost saving. We've done a ton of cost savings while we've had enrollment increases to contain those tuition costs. And contingency planning. We were able to have that 0% increase last year because of the cost containment efforts that we made across the organization over the last 3 years. So those were the annual budgeting. Now we're looking at long-term. So what sets us apart? One was our goal setting and our long-term planning. I was able to share it with some of my people at the National Business Officers Association. I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and we were able to really, ours is now being used, and I've been asked to speak on this actually in China in a few weeks on what we've done as far as this overall global goal setting project has gone. Staff housing strategy. I would love to take some credit for this, but this came before me. One of the things that we have done at ASD that really on the world stage sets us apart is we purchased 60 units of housing. That was about 5 years ago and about 3 years ago. 8 years ago, and then 3 years ago we purchased another 10 units. So we own 60 units of housing. Well, those housing units are owned by the capital fund and rented back at a discount to the operating fund. So on 60 of our 145 units of housing, you get a 50% discount rate because we're renting them to ourselves. That was an amazing decision that was made, and it actually hedges us against fluctuations in the market. On the remaining 84 units of housing, we've done invested a lot of effort, thanks to our facilities team, on negotiating those rents and making really strategic decisions around landlords and what we do to maximize that benefit to our staff while minimizing the cost. Reserve endowment strategy, and that continues on, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. Facility master planning, what Paul was talking about in terms of the facility, we've also done a lot of work around the costing, and I'm working with Fielding there kind of on the side, where we're saying, okay, we know that the future of education is going to mean facility changes. So let's plot out for the next 15 years, not only the things that we need to do maintenance-wise, like we're going to expect the windows to be replaced, these doorknobs to be replaced. We're going to plot all that out. Major capital expansion, resurfacing of the track, resurfacing of the tennis courts. We've got a 15-year major capital projects projection. We discount those costs back and fund those costs so that we can be properly prepared, so that schools that get themselves into trouble have to have special assessments when major capital projects come around, and we won't need to do that. And intergenerational equity, this is one of my favorite slides because it's colorful and it hopefully embodies what I'm going to be talking about. And I'll use my own children as an example. They attended a private school in Canada. Our family was there for 15 years. We arrived at the school when it was relatively new, and really there wasn't a lot of facilities work that needed to be done. But over those 15 years, our family walked on carpets, we turned doorknobs, and so we needed to pay the proportionate share of the future facilities cost of repairs and maintenance during our time there. So they consider it basically the benchmark is you fund depreciation. So as your buildings depreciate, you're setting aside money to replace and enhance those facilities. But what we did when we started plotting out our cash flows, we realized your generation of parents is paying off debt. So it's inappropriate that you also fund reserves according to depreciation, because you would be paying a disproportionate share of the facilities wear and tear. So what we said is we're seeking to equalize the cost of attending ASD amongst the different generations that attend here. So I don't know if this is clear. That might have been a little bit too short of an explanation, but I'm feeling, Paul's looking at his watch, so I'm starting to hurry this along. Anyway, I don't want to bore you with the things that excite me, but this really is all about ensuring that you have a degree of confidence in the fact that we're looking out that your group of parents that's here during this age and stage of the school isn't paying a disproportionate share of the long-term costs of operating the school. And this is something that we plan and manage around. So that's it. So Paul's going to talk now about the budget, and then we can field any questions at the end.
Thank you, Diane. That was perfect. Thank you. So I hope you learned something. I always learn something when Diane is talking, and it's really important for you to see how it's constructed, because the nonprofit model is very, very rare in the international market and very rare in Dubai, and even our own community, many people don't realize the nonprofit nature of that, because perhaps they've only experienced for-profit models. So please help us educate your own peers and parents, because the model is the gold standard in schools, just like it is in most organizations. But most of our parents are still confused about that. So the budget process starts in August, right when we get back from school, from the summer break. And it starts really in the fall with Diane working with each department head, each owner of the cost center, whether it's a principal or a director, to make sure that we're starting to build a budget that is fiscally responsible, going to meet all of our needs that you heard from Diane here in her presentation. We also look at how much we ended up spending the year before, so we can match actual, whether it's gone down or whether it's gone up a little. We want to match that. So the budget is very much an adaptable instrument. We also want to roll in any new improvements, anything that's supporting our strategic initiatives, we want to roll into the position. But we also go through, as Diane mentioned, cost containment. If a position becomes vacant, we ask the question, do we really need to fill it? Can we fill it in a different way? Because we know that every single piece of that budget needs scrutiny, so that we only raise tuition as much as we need to. We don't go into it saying how much can we raise tuition. It is how little can we raise tuition and fees, so that we can be sensitive to the lived reality that you have every day. So the budget then around winter time goes to the Board of Trustees, who have the really important stewardship responsibility to make sure that they're supporting a budget that is going to meet the needs of today, but looks not just tomorrow, but long into the future. This is a core function of the board, and it's a fantastic partnership, and they push us and we push back, and over several meetings, several hours, and some strong coffee, we get to where we feel really good about the budget, and that's where we are today. So here's how it looks. I mentioned the budget being approved by the board, and it's built on an anticipated increase of tuition of 1.5%. And tuition is almost always the topic that gets the most debate. And it was no different this year, especially since you can see the trend of how we've gone back the last 5 years. And of course, KHDA allows us to increase it even greater, but we would never do that unless there was a real compelling need. So last year we had the freeze, which was a real test to the model and required quite a bit of work. And this year, 1.5% creates a budget that protects what's most important, and that is the services to your children, but also keeping in mind the long-term interests and also being very sensitive to the economy out there. We have not increased the facility fee for many years. Facility fee goes right into making sure these amazing facilities, which are now 10 years old, continue to get the kind of replacement. You heard Diane's example, so that it's really important that we keep mindful of this particular fee. And then the budget is based on a projected enrollment of 1,908. For this coming school year, we increased by about 50 students. And we're going to try for 20 more, we're going to enroll 20 more. We have a good, healthy pool that's coming in. Our attrition rates have been excellent. Of course, we're watching particularly carefully the last couple of years. So we're on average about 12% attrition rate. Right now we're at 15%, but we still have families who are undecided. So we anticipate reaching 1908, which balances the budget, and you're not going to notice an extra 20 students from what we have right now, but this is what we'll open in August with. So last thing is really just, you can see we take in revenue. Revenue comes from tuition, almost entirely from tuition, and it all goes back into expenses. So the vast majority, we're a people organization, so 75% of it goes right back into our faculty, staff, salary and benefits, and you can see facilities. This is where we're just upkeeping, we're replacing the track, we're doing all sorts of things around here, so you'd never notice any sort of wear and tear. And then, of course, education, consumables, administration and support. Administration in a broader term, not just administrators, but all the people who help support the three divisions. And then PD. I just want to say, ASD is known for its professional development, its support of teachers growing. It's one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, teachers come here, because of their professional experience. And the research shows that schools that do invest in professional development have greater learner outcomes, not just for teachers, but it translates to the students. So this is a culture where teachers every day are trying to get better. Okay, halas, we're done talking at you. So please, we're here to field any questions. Everything is transparent and open. What's on your mind? Yes.
Have corporate seats pretty much frozen in terms of how they used to sit in the marketplace? Or is this a revenue stream that ASD continues to pursue by appealing to American companies or North American companies?
It's definitely slowed down in the last year, 2 years. So the sale of seats, I think, because sometimes the grades are more accessible. So, and it's a reflection of the economy as well. So
it's still part of we still pursue and we're still open to them, and we've still kept the same scheme that we had. We had a few seats sold for this year or last year, but it is slowed down. Yeah. Yes.
What would you say is the overwhelming sort of need to increase the budget or increase tuition by 1.5%? I understand it's much lower than in the years past, but looking at teacher side, is
yes.
it the benefit side?
Yes.
There's a built-in 2.5% increase in the scales. So teachers are paid on a grid, and those grids increase by 2.5%. So we're able to increase to have everyone move up the grid, as well as based on a 2.5% increase.
Let me just add to that. We recruit, you heard Diane mention that we are benchmarking expenses externally, even beyond Dubai. So the teachers we recruit, we're trying to recruit from London, Singapore, Hong Kong, all over the world, right? And we need to remain competitive. And one of the things that's built into all compensation and benefit scales is this longevity increase. So when you hear the 2.5%, virtually every school in the world has that. And when you get into, if a school gets into, well, we're going to give a raise and then we're not going to give a raise for a few years, we would lose those teachers. You may be able to get away with it in some some schools, but the quality of teachers that we have who are very mobile and have many different options can really write their ticket to anywhere in the world. We have to stay competitive with what the rest of the schools are. So the 2.5% is baked in, and that requires a pretty heavy commitment when 75% of your expenses go. So as Diane mentioned, we do a lot of cost containment around that, so that we can, we relook at every contract, we look at the housing rentals, we look at insurance, so that we can draw from that savings rather than having to raise tuition. The easy thing we'd do is just raise tuition, but we don't do that.
Yeah, because at 75% of your overall budget, the rest of the line items, there's almost nothing you can.
There's very few controllable costs.
Absolutely.
So the things we can mainly control are with attrition of staff. We can control how many teaching couples we bring in versus the ones with dependents. But even that, we have very little control over, because in order to land the best and the brightest, we've got to respond to their familial situation. So, yeah.
We know what makes ASD what it is not the amazing facilities, it's and the amazing families we have. It's the high quality teachers that we can recruit and keep here. That's yeah.
We made a decision a few years ago to actively and purposefully hire and retain older, more experienced teachers. We know that some of the schools against which one might say we compete actively look to encourage attrition and bring in younger, less experienced teachers at lower salaries. So that's the way they control their costs. They just bring in teachers who are willing to, maybe the new teachers out of school, who are willing to get their first job and then use that for 2 years, then move on to their next position. We purposely do not do that. Now, are there some younger teachers who are highly qualified we bring in? We look for a good mix of experience and young and energetic? Absolutely. But it's important because, again, we're a community school. Our teachers are part of our community. We want folks to stay. So our tenure at ASD is doubled and nearly tripled than some of the other schools here in the country.
One of the things I've heard happen is that the school tries to recruit teacher couples. And I think one of the concerns of parents that I've heard talked about is it's hard to control quality when you're getting 2 for 1. Like one might be really good, one may not. So I guess, can you guys kind of talk to that as to how important that is?
Yeah, we constantly remind ourselves that we're never going to compromise or settle our standards just to get one, say, all-star teacher or another who's okay. So every single one of them, both couples, and usually they're split between divisions and they have different people. In each case, if it's not an enthusiastic yes for both, we won't hire the whole couple. We turn away couples all the time because one of them we're not confident now. As with all hiring, and you may be in this business as well, you do your due diligence, you do your referencing, you do your observations, they come, and sometimes it's not always what you thought. So we don't compromise our standards. That being said, if we have a really good couple, we'll hire them over 2 singles because it does help contain costs. And sometimes they have children, and that will help them stay once their children see what an amazing education that they're getting.
You've got career development, and then you've got salary increases. One's a little bit more than the other. And yet when you evaluate career development, theoretically that would lead to even greater financial opportunities. So when you look at your mix, what type of analysis are we doing? Like if you went to a teacher and you said you invest 8 years in ASD, you have a Harvard MBA career development path mapped out for you versus I can give you a 2% increase spread over a couple of years. And has anyone asked the teachers which is more important given the fact that resources are finite?
Yes, and this afternoon we're doing the kind of a few times a year we get everybody together in the same room and we talk about the strategic improvements, but we will be talking about budget and compensation. So you had a few things in there that I want to respond to. Our teachers come here and stay here because of the professional and personal experience. What we try to do with compensation is stay competitive and make sure that in their mind, their housing, their insurance, their salaries don't become a reason for them to say, I just can't be here anymore. So we heavily invest in their professional growth, and they tend to stay because they know that even some of the best schools out there don't offer the same level of professional training that we do. It is really a hallmark of ASD. So we keep them here, we keep developing them, we try to keep that experience as positive as possible. We try to make sure they don't start waking up thinking, I can't make ends meet. Now, we've surveyed the staff the last 2 years. What they've said is very appreciative of the professional development, very appreciative of their housing. A lot of work went in before even Diane and I were here to improve the quality of housing. But they say we offered them a whole different bunch of schemes, like just ideas. Do you want more professional training? Do you want more flexible housing benefit where you might be able to choose? We give you an allowance, something like that. What they said is more cash in hand, because Dubai is becoming more challenging with the VAT, with just the expenses of Dubai. And this is nothing that's news to you. You're going through this as well. So teachers themselves, because they have children who want to go on trips, because they want to save, it's becoming more challenging for everybody, not just you, but for our teachers. So when we survey them, they say, if you could invest in our compensation in particular, we'll then make choices, whether it's saving, whether it's spending, whatever it is. That came back loud and clear. Yes.
Do you have any system in place that rewards all-star teachers? So what I've realized personally by talking to a lot of other parents in the school is we may have a high caliber of teachers, but they really vary in their consistency. And some I would call all-stars, and I recognize that because I have an all-star teacher this year, and I was able to benchmark her against other teachers that we've had. So does that matter to you at the school? To be able to for parents maybe to recognize and call out and maybe reward those teachers, because, for example, you may be able to deploy them, where they're mostly needed, to support certain students across the school.
Yes.
So, have you thought about that? Is there a system in place?
So we do that. We reward them with everything from recognition to special projects to promoting, giving them leadership training. That's one of the most common things we do, is we have a leadership track for teachers. Even though they'll probably never move into a leadership position at ASD, we give them that sort of training so that they could have options down the road. So usually the all-star teachers start to think about it in broader terms. As far as financial reward, merit pay is a really controversial topic. I'm firm, and I've been following this for 15 years, and every school I've been at has this debate. The research is pretty clear that it doesn't deliver the kind of return that you might expect. Of course, the person who receives it feels good, but the general impact on the rest of the faculty is negative. I had a small experience where at a previous place back in the States, local golf club just decided to start giving bonuses to the all-star teachers. The school committee, with good intention, said, okay, we'll set up a little committee. And they've done it for 10 years, and I haven't seen anything that was more disruptive to harmony among teachers than every year giving $5,000 check to people a small committee decided were the all-stars. So it's a concept that gets widely debated, and I don't think it's definitive on either end, but it's an area that we don't go down that road. But as far as recognizing all-star teachers and doing all the non-financial stuff, absolutely, that happens every single day.
And can you help contribute to that by recognizing stuff? If I'm a parent who wants to recognize a teacher,
Sure.
Is there a way to do that, a formal way to do that, like to you guys or to the
Yeah, so I get emails all the time. I both send it to the teacher and make a connection and say, hey, that was really great. That speaks wonders, because there's a lot going on here. Sometimes we may spread more of the negative or concerns than the positive, but every single time, even if it's a note, I know a lot of teachers who keep their notes, that you write them, which is a lot more powerful than an email, and it makes a huge difference. So please, yes, please do that.
And I just want to add to that as a mother, and that is that some of the tougher situations that my kids encountered over the years ended up, when I reflect back, as some of the learning and growing times for them, and also some of the teachers that were really good for. I have two very, very different daughters, and one that would have been an all-star with one of them would have been an absolute debacle with the other one. So it is hard, because sometimes it's hard to define what all-star means, because it comes down to who your children are and what their experiences are. So, so.
Very good point. What else is on your mind? Yes?
Does the school have any ideas of additional revenue streams?
Excellent. My favorite topic. We have a concept of auxiliary revenue, and it's been, I was at a conference where there was one of the schools, actually Sidwell Friends I think it's in DC, has developed, I think they're generating about 13% of their annual operating budget is coming from auxiliary revenue. And as a not-for-profit, we're, there's some people that are, well, we can't generate alternative revenue streams, but what good schools are doing is really synergistic projects. So what they're doing is STEM projects, like there's this thing called Go Baby Go, where the kids are participating in science and research projects extracurricularly, and they're bringing in third-party groups. We're looking, it's all open season right now, that the next, I've been working with Marcus Holberg, and we've already looked at our vendors and how we can cost recover from them on some of the wear and tear on the facilities around utilization of our properties. And all of this this was part, I used to have a saying here that said the future, and that was what we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and I just want to say there are a couple kind of obvious ways that schools have done it. One is through the annual giving. At some point when that becomes sustainable, you can many schools decide to roll that into the operating revenue. So you can start to count on that. So that's a lot of, when you hear us talking about the importance of giving, we do have long-term goals, not just supporting today, but getting to the point where we can mitigate tuition even through giving. And the other, as you mentioned, is through becoming more of a business. You see a lot of schools in Dubai doing that. We haven't done that because we don't want to distract from our core mission, which is educating your children. However, we have some opportunities, whether it's our professional training, whether it's some of our programs that we allow third-party contractors to make quite a bit of money on. We're considering now expanding our own operations. Stuff, again, you won't see it in the classrooms, but other wing of our operations to be able to take in more revenue, which of course will then mitigate any tuition increases. So yes, we're starting to go down those roads where we haven't before or haven't needed to. You got a follow-up?
I want to specify my question a little bit more. Additional revenue that's not coming from parents. Because if you're talking about the giving, it's still coming out.
Sure. So whether it's a sport or music lessons or community pool or even the training center, we would be in some areas expanding it beyond our own community. So of course we get a lot of interest from those outside who are not part of the ASD community, wants to come on and access our programs. We don't do that. We don't do that for a number of reasons, but we may start doing that in some areas.
So an example of that would be if we have a consultant coming from North America to do professional development with our teachers, we have a vision in the future of making that available on the weekends to educators outside of the confines of our teaching staff to allay the cost of bringing that person in that is currently being absorbed in our professional development budget. Things like that.
Yes.
Kind of a small question, but you mentioned the apartments. It seems like there should be a plan to continue to buy more. You didn't mention it, but are you trying to save money in order to do that?
I'll speak to the first part. We're always on an annual basis taking advantage. If we know the market is dropping, we renegotiate our rents. And being such a big client, most landlords are doing that. So we're able to get some savings into this budget, which help keep the number lower. You want to speak to purchase?
Yeah, sure. No, great point. And we are actively looking, negotiating with banks now around, increasing our some debt facilities that allows us to go do that. It would seem that now is a good time in the market to do so. We have some cash reserves allocated for that. Part of the challenge is where, and it's a constant, obviously close is more expensive. So how far can you go? How far are teachers, able to drive? Heston Street is increasingly difficult in the mornings and the evenings. So when the right properties come up, we will jump on them. And we actually have a committee who is working at negotiating en masse for the current rental properties, but also looking for some either a purpose-built site. We've looked at probably upwards of 20 different projects around a purpose-built site, but land cost has always been.
Yeah, I mean,
we're always open to it. If you you have any ideas, and there's anybody here today who has ideas of blocking anywhere from 10 to 50 apartments or townhouses,
Come talk to us.
Not if you just thought of it now. But it's, the more we can control housing is huge benefits down the road, as you can imagine, with so many teachers in housing. So we're always looking to the future, not just today. Yes?
To the way you began the presentation about the kind of more strategic and so forth, it's a question I've wanted to ask in a bunch of different presentations when you kind of make a reference to how we're going to have this sort of smart device in our pockets, and so how much they, and it makes me always wonder this question of the knowledge at hand in your pocket versus what's in your head. And I have this impression that the more knowledge you actually have in your brain, it allows you to kind of make connections that aren't already there. If you have to kind of go out into Google to kind of get a piece of data, but if I'm definitely in favor of the progressive approach and so forth. But this is the one question that always makes me wonder, like, but if I don't have it in my head to do that kind of unconscious creativity, all of this is, you need all of this information to kind of make the connections between things. You can't do that if you have to look at it.
So the way we're looking at it's a great fundamental question and point to what we're trying to do. The emphasis, the shift that we're making is less teacher providing the knowledge, spaced out over the course of a year, but more focus on helping students think. What you're describing is thinking. You will grab content when you need it. And instead of waiting perhaps for the teacher to provide it, you can grab it from the internet. You can maybe even grab it from a personal assistant, whatever you have access to. So we're focusing much more on your thinking dispositions, your ability to make the right questions, inquiry, projects that are interdisciplinary and not just divided into these neat little silos. So the access of content, see, when you have a teacher who maps out the entire year, I'm going to talk about this and this week and this and the next week, then we're going to do Civil War battles, then we're going to do that. It's high control, and most people forget it anyways. Retention is like less than 5%, even a month later, much less several years. So it's that thinking piece that is really where we're going to have value as a school. Otherwise, you could just do an online program and in your living room with your kids. So it's that thinking piece is what I hear you saying, and that's exactly what we're all about. Because retention is a widely debated, is what can the brain actually retain? Very little, unless you disrupt it somehow by challenging it, making the brain think, making connections, and then content becomes on demand, not something you just receive passively. You go get it. We should probably have it. Next time you have your laptop in the cafeteria, we'll sit down and I'll come over and we'll have a good chat. Okay. Yes,
What is your turnover for teachers?
Yeah, good question. It's usually between 12 and 17%. Last year was about 13. This year we're trending a little higher at about 17%, which internationally is very good. Typically 20, 30%. I'd say our neighbor next door is certainly probably double what we are. That being said, one teacher leaves. We want to try to retain everyone unless we feel that it's time for them to move on. So we're tracking with kind of our contemporaries, which are about 15 to 20 of what we feel are the best international schools in the world. It's a harder location. We won't lie about that. So people may stay longer in Switzerland than they stay here, but they do stay here a lot longer than they do at other places in the region, and even Dubai.
Do you guys see a cost savings for retention versus?
Absolutely. So although we're, the old days you used to hire everyone from these big fairs. You'd fly to the big cities, you'd stay in a hotel. It was like speed dating, and you'd offer contracts would be flying around. Not the best method and very costly. And you're using firms who get a placement fee. We hire now greater than half of our teachers direct, meaning they just apply to us directly through our portal. We don't pay any cost. We Skype with them. We've ended up saving in that respect. We still have a relationship with fairs. We're trying to divorce ourselves from as many of those as possible. But I'd say the average cost of recruiting a teacher could be between $5,000 and $15,000 if we have to go through the fairs. And the more we can keep, of course, even though we're giving them a 2.5% increase, it pales in comparison to the cost of going out there and finding new teachers. So it's a really good point.
And as you build your vision
Yeah.
of how you want to move forward with the school and such, are we making the decisions on this teacher doesn't fit?
Yes.
End this contract early, or do we just wait for the contracts to finish and kind of let it go?
Yeah, so everyone's on a one-year contract, so it gives us flexibility, except our new teachers are on a 2-year just because we don't want them to take off after 1 year. So the 1 year allows us the flexibility of, obviously, if something's really going wrong, you might have a teacher leave, but it's rare. So every November, we're sitting as an admin team and saying, is this teacher making adequate progress? And of course, the vast majority we're not worried about at all, and they just continue on. But there are a group that we are working carefully with. If we don't see progress, we'll say it's no longer a good fit, and we'll go and find a better replacement. So staffing is the most important thing we do as leaders, is getting the right people in front of your children. So, but as I said, sometimes it's not an exact science of, and the pool is not necessarily shrinking. I think I said that last night. There are many more players in the mix now. There are hundreds of schools opening up in China in the last several years, and they're throwing money at people to try to get them to go. So it is harder for us to recruit than it has been in the past, and we're competing against regions of the world that might be more attractive. Jane?
Can you comment on the recruitment of the new ES principal?
Sure. So we have we're just going to announce to our own faculty and staff the timeline and the panel that will search. It'll be posted within the next day or two. So it's late, but there may be some exceptional candidates out there. We tend to get very strong interest with our administrative posts. So we will see what's out there. If we're not happy with the quality, we're not going to settle. What we'll do is we'll find a probably retired, highly capable and known principal who would come in for a year, kind of bridge, and then we'll focus the search on 2020. So if we don't fill the position in the next couple of months, we'll repost in June, and we'll spend the summer getting candidates ready for a September and October visit. And of course, some of you have written and would like to be involved, and there'll be opportunities for parents to help us. All right, so I'm going to do a stop at that point. We won't run out of the room. If you have any questions you'd rather ask us individually. But I want to thank Joe for being here today. And
well, if I could just publicly recognize Diane and Paul. They put a ton of work into this. I mean, probably no less. Well, in the teams of meetings that it took to get us to this point, there's still work to be done. There's still costs to be looked at. So we set up to 1.5%. So it's an ongoing process until we issue invoices. But I'd also like to recognize, they make the job of the board so much easier by their subject matter expertise, by their professionalism, and I think helping us think about what the future might hold for ASD if we can think about it and we're putting in place the resources to do it. So thank you both.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. We like parents to come and engage. We're a community school, so please continue to do so.
Thank you.